The United States of America, the world's greatest economy, and the tiny nation of Malaysia have become two important economic and strategic partners in the 21st century. The two nations' relationship plays a critical role in enabling the region of Southeast Asia to grow. This is led by both bilateral trade the two nations share and how some United States-based companies often see Malaysia as their base of operations when entering the region's market. Oftentimes, however, international companies do tend to choose Singapore above all, but in some rare cases, Malaysia's attractiveness continuously tries to battle out competitiveness. It's often noted across numerous articles and institutes that Malaysia is even, in fact, the top country in emerging Southeast Asia for foreign investments. This is because of Malaysia's strong economic performance, highly qualified workforce, and a nation integrated within the global economy. Back to our topic of the US and Malaysia relations, the two have a strong bilateral trade volume. In 2021, they had registered close to $71.4 billion worth of imports and exports. Favored, of course, for Malaysia, as the Southeast Asian nation has always been known to have a strong surplus worth of exports to the US. Clearly, a sign that shows how strong of a demand there is for Malaysian-based products and services in the US. This huge surplus is more than likely a big figure that consistently boosts Malaysia's overall gross domestic product, as it is also evident across numerous years that Malaysia has always had a surplus with the US in terms of trade. Furthermore, the US has always had a strong inflow of foreign direct investments to Malaysia, one that has consistently grown over the decades it has done so. From the 1980s, when the US had averaged around $1 billion worth of investments flows to more than $10 billion annually in the 21st century. This has always been evident across the numerous industries of Malaysia, whether that is through manufacturing, to which we saw big chip companies such as Intel establish a huge billion-dollar presence in the country, to ExxonMobil, where the US oil and gas firm has proudly named Malaysia as one of their major oil producers and suppliers of natural gas businesses, and even recently, where several US-based firms had gone onto Malaysia to construct data centers. The two nations, truly, in many ways, have exchanged vital key economic engines that encompass their neighboring countries. But how did Malaysia and the United States relations actually start, and what were the major key points that led them to where they are today? Malaysia-US relations have had very long and deep commercial and consular interests with one another, one that stretches way back to the 1800s, where the US had its own consular posts across northern Borneo. During the century, it even saw the emergence of the so-called American Trading Company of Borneo, where the company operated with Chinese investors and acquired lands in the country. The US's vast presence across Malaysia would continue to expand, placing landmarks across Georgetown to Kuala Lumpur and Kuching. Throughout the centuries that followed until the 20th century, the two nations would continue to express interests with one another. From World War II to the Indonesian-Malaysian conflict, the modern relations between the two, however, started in the year 1957, when they had established official diplomatic relations. This saw their economic and political ties to be intertwined, one that would have a long, twisting story, led by strong demands of one another in terms of trade and investments, and political ploy that, at times, be seen as critical. Exports from Malaysia to the US have always been a huge factor in the two nations. Malaysia was renowned for its production of numerous goods, even at a time when rubber had become Malaysia's most important export, to which the US had imported the majority of the said commodity. Throughout the 20th century, American-based companies have also helped pioneer much of Malaysia's vast industries that stand today. It is said that companies such as Intel, Western Digital, Texas Instruments, and others have helped create Malaysia's electrical and electronic sector, which today, if you are not aware of it, is amongst the biggest and most important sectors in the nation. Their continuous economic partnership would, however, also attract numerous political strains, where at one point, former Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad has been critical of the foreign policy of the United States, citing numerous fallacies across different governmental actions done by the US. This is even evident in today's society, where Malaysia's government had been against the formation of the so-called AUKUS deal, a trilateral security pact between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the US, which the Malaysian government had warned against as it will raise military tensions in the Asian continent. Whether that would be a problem, however, is all but hard to discuss, as there are strong statements on the formation of such a deal, on its pros and cons. Anyway, back to our topic. The two nations, despite at times disagreeable states, still share a strong political relationship. Numerous heads of government would always visit one another's country and, at surprising times, would announce further partnership, deepening of relations, and more connectivity of each other's economy. One that, again, helped form the basis of a lot of Malaysia's vast industries. As noted earlier, Malaysia has consistently received around $10 to $15 billion worth of annual investments from the US. This has, according to a report in 2018, helped pave the way for over 200,000 workers to be employed in Malaysia. A stunning feat. Moreover, while economic and political relations are of utmost importance in any country, they also hold a strong education and community relations, where the US had become one of the best international countries to either study or immigrate to from Malaysia. It is stated that Malaysia has been migrating to the US at large since the 1970s, and today marks close to a 40,000 Malaysian American community in the US. Finally, the two nations also shared strong security cooperation and alliance since the 1990s. They are part of a number of military relations with the US. This ranges from the sale of military-grade equipment to high-technology devices, and even at times when the US conducts international military education schemes. Today, the two nations' relations are even strikingly seeing stronger forms of cooperation. The US keeps on importing Malaysian goods, where they too have created $billion worth of investments. The latest data provided by the Malaysian Investment Development Authority, published for the first quarter of approved investments in 2022, has seen that the United States has become the third largest source of investments, only behind Germany and Brunei. But while indeed the two nations share a still growing relationship, Malaysia's biggest partner as of recently has been the nation of China. China itself has become not just Malaysia but around the Southeast Asian region and the developing world, positioning itself as the next big economic superpower. Its trade alone even surpasses that of the US, where the two nations had a bilateral volume of close to $180 billion. Unlike the US, however, Chinese exports are mostly favored. But this might be a given, as China-based products have become famous for being either cheap, of quality, and even at times necessary. Further, while the US is also a big source of investments, their investments are still under strong competitiveness across many Asian countries, largely from East Asian nations and other Southeast Asian countries. This is why numerous institutes have claimed that, indeed, Malaysia has become one of the best investment destinations on the entire continent, and thus paving the way for big economies to choose Malaysia as their destination. Well, either way, the US still holds a strong position in Malaysia. There are even numerous major mergers and acquisitions that have occurred as of late, one that a lot of US-based firms had done so. Firms such as the Blackstone Group, McKinsey & Company, Convergys, Accenture, and more have acquired big Malaysian companies. They had also not just purchased them, but also helped fund numerous goals and dreams of many Malaysian entrepreneurs. Lastly, the most recent economic framework established in May of 2022 is seeing a stronger connection with Malaysia and the US. The initiative, which is known as the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, is a 14-member program that would help increase further trade and economic collaboration. This is often applauded by numerous Malaysian business groups, as it would truly help the two nations' trade prosper, although there is also some sentiment across the field against such. Anyway, the two nations have had profound miracles with one another, and also a mix of numerous political conflicts, while indeed it is true they are not the only nations that do so. After all, the US has big stakes across the world, not limited to its economic ties, one that will really bring in numerous controversies and criticism. But what do you think? Let us know down below.